Max Q Productions presents Calling All Stations, a novel, written and narrated by Gilles Messier. Chapter 4. Prince Pablo. My 11th birthday came and went unnoticed and unmarked as usual, though I never shall forget that day long as I live. I was in the lamp house, replacing the carbon rods on the arc lamp, when suddenly I heard a clattering above me. I looked up to see an enormous bird, an albatross, I think, perched atop the lantern. "Oh, hello," I said as the magnificent creature eyed me through the glass. "What brings you here?" "Who the hell are you talking to?" Father's voice boomed up the stairs. Startled, the bird spread his massive wings and soared gracefully out to sea. Nobody," I answered. "The devil is wrong with you, boy," said Father. "Get that lamp finished. It'll be dark soon." I watched with a heavy heart as the bird faded into the distance, a tiny white dot soaring freely over the vast ocean. He could leave whenever he wished, wander to any corner of the globe. For many weeks now, an agonizing decision had been gnawing at me, and in that melancholy moment I at last made up my mind. That night, I would shut off the wireless for good. She was a good machine and had taken me on the grandest tour a boy could ask for, but I could no longer deny the truth. I was fated to live and die on Bell Rock, and it was folly to keep deluding myself with childish fantasies of a roving life. It was a bitter parting, but it was all for the best. "Well, goodbye then," I choked, tears welling in my eyes. I reached for the switch. Then a strange message suddenly flashed over the airwaves, so loud I could hear it through the headphones hanging on their peg. "SOS, ayuda, SOS, ayuda." Ayuda? That was Spanish for help. Immediately I donned the headphones and poised my finger on the signal key. "Es Bell Rock, ¿cómo puedo ayudar?" I answered. "How can I help?" "Bell Rock," the Spaniard replied. "Inglés?" "Escocia," I said. "Scotland." "What is name?" came the reply, in English. "Edward. Y usted?" "Principe Pablo." "Principe," I thought, frowning. "A prince?" I must have misheard. "Principe de España?" I asked. "Si." I blinked. A Spanish prince? Surely not. I had met some strange characters over the airwaves, but this was something else entirely. The notion was downright absurd. I couldn't well imagine Prince Albert hunched in front of a wireless set, headphones tucked under his crown. Utterly baffled, I pressed him for details. I sat in slack-jawed amazement as the most astonishing story trickled into my ears. Prince Pablo was the eldest of 2 royal sons, and next in line for the throne. But his jealous brother Alfonso, disowned by their father the king, had plotted against him, kidnapping and imprisoning him in a remote fortress. He had then issued an ultimatum. Either Pablo abandoned his claim to the throne, the king paid an outrageous ransom, or Pablo would die. The king had agreed to the ransom, but the royal coffers had fallen short of Alfonso's demands. "Please help," he signaled. "No time." My mind reeled. Not since Treasure Island had I heard anything like this. A kidnapped Spanish prince, an evil plotting brother, an impregnable fortress. This is the stuff of grand adventures. A vision of myself flashed through my mind, racing to the rescue in the motor launch. Cutlass in hand, I scaled the sheer walls of the fortress and fought my way through hordes of elite guards to the keep where the prince lay imprisoned. I then saw myself in the royal palace, being knighted by a grateful king as a hero of the realm. But I swiftly descended from this heady reverie. After all, how could I possibly help the prince? I was a prisoner myself. How can I help? Can pay ransom? How to tell him I hadn't a penny to my name? My only possessions were the clothes on my back and the signal key between my fingers. I cursed in frustration. Prince Pablo was about to die, and I was powerless to stop it. "No," I answered with a sigh. "Know someone who can?" said Pablo. "Yes," I answered hesitantly. "Father." "How much?" "Do not know." "Please help. No time. Father will be grateful. Give great riches." A tingle ran up my spine. "Riches?" I tapped. "What riches?" "I must go," said Pablo. "They are coming." Then the signal went dead. "Principe?" I signaled. "Principe Pablo?" But there was no response. Casting off the headphones, I dashed up the stairs to the observation deck, where Father was standing his nightly watch. I never bothered him with wireless chit-chat before, but this was something he had to hear. "Father, Father," I said, "you'll never guess what." Father slowly lowered his binoculars. "Well," he snapped. "Out with it, then." "On the wireless," I said. "A prince! A real prince! From Spain! A palace and jewels and everything, truly! And he's in trouble. His brother kidnapped him, you see, and he'll kill him if he doesn't get a ransom. What rubbish is this, said Father. Go to your room. It's not rubbish. If we help him, his father will give us loads of gold and jewels. I suddenly found myself staring into the dragon's eye. I'm warning you, boy, said Father. Whatever nonsense you've gotten into your head, drop it now. Now go to your room. It's all true, I swear, I pleaded. We need to help him. He'll make us rich, and we don't need to live here anymore. We can leave this place. Go to your room, Father hissed. This time I obeyed. I should have known better. In my excitement I had forgotten that Father would never see reason. Too bad for him, I thought. He could have his damned lighthouse. I would rescue the prince myself, and while Father soaked in cold sea spray, I would be weighted on hand and foot in Pablo's palace, draped in the finest silks. Though no swashbuckling assault of fantasy, my rescue would be no less daring. Curled up in my bed, I plodded late into the night. The next evening I set the first phase of my plan into motion. As soon as Father climbed up to the rail, I crept into his bedroom and counted the banknotes in the cigar box at his bedside. I gasped. Inside was nearly 500 pounds. After carefully replacing the stack, I slipped silently from the room and ran downstairs to contact Prince Pablo. But when I pushed on the wireless door, it would not open. I threw my weight against it, thinking perhaps the wood had swelled. But no, it was locked. No, I cried in dismay. I had to contact Pablo. I had his ransom. I just needed an address to send it to. But what could I do? Father would never give up those keys again. Unless... No, I thought, recoiling at the notion. Father would kill me. But a moment's pause set my thoughts straight. I could not stay here. I had to escape, see the wide world before this dull grey purgatory set me straight to Bedlam. I lay down on my bed and steeled myself for the coming task. The hour of action came at dawn, when Father came back down from the lantern house. Back to full health, he now slept for 6 hours after sunrise. The moment I heard his bedroom door shut, I took up my position just outside and waited. Before long, Father's snoring echoed through the lighthouse. It took all my courage to ease open the heavy wooden door and enter the dragon's lair. Inside, Father had blocked the window with an old box, plunging the room into murky twilight. I could see his massive chest rising and falling like a bellows beneath the sheets. Each breath rustled through his whiskers and brushed up against my cheek as I approached the bed, reeking of whiskey and tobacco. I rummaged through the bedside table, a wary eye fixed on that face, but found nothing. Glancing about the room, my eyes fell on Father's oilskins hanging by the door. I patted over and plunged my hand into one pocket, then another, until at last my fingers grazed a mass of cold steel. Victory. Careful not to rattle them, I gently lifted the keys and turned towards the door. But suddenly my hand was pulled back as the keys caught on some thread or fold in the pocket. I pulled again, wincing as the keys rattled. Father did not stir. Reaching with my other hand, I tugged harder to free the snag. The thread broke. The keys went flying, arcing through the air and landing on the floor with an almighty crash. A stunned silence filled the room, as though a bomb had gone off. Father's snoring abruptly ceased, and I gaped in horror as he began to grumble, snort, and toss in his bed. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I was a dead man. But Father never woke. After much tossing and grunting, he fell still once again, and his snoring resumed. I stood frozen to the spot for a long moment before finally coming to my senses, whereupon I scooped the keys from the floor and scurried from the room. Prince Pablo, I signaled upon reaching the wireless room. Are you there? There was no reply. I repeated the message several more times. Still nothing. I had been afraid of this. He, too, had only occasional access to his wireless. I could listen all day and never catch him. But I had only a few hours before I had to return Father's keys, so I kept signaling for as long as I could. Miraculously, an hour later, a reply rang through the headphones. I am here. You have ransom? Yes, I said. How are your guards treating you? Good. How much? Maybe not much, I said. 500 pounds? The truth was I hadn't a clue how much that would be to a Spaniard. Perhaps it was no more than a tuppence. Then a strange, stammering string of letters reached my ear, rather like Sven's tremor. It is much, he said. In my country it is much. Enough for Alfonso? Enough for his greed. Send it quickly. Where? I wrote down the address of the royal palace in Madrid, which Pablo repeated many times to make sure I'd gotten it right. I sighed with relief. The second part of my plan was now complete. "Tell me about the palace," I asked, making conversation. "Time is up," he said. "I must go." "When will you return?" "Do not know. They are coming." Suddenly, something occurred to me, something that had bothered me since I first heard his SOS. "How did you get radio?" I asked. "Bribe guards," Pablo answered some moments later. "With what?" "Ring on finger." Of course, I thought. A prince would have plenty of expensive jewelry about him. "They are coming," he repeated. "Good luck." "Thank you. I am grateful." Then the signal went dead. I shut off the wireless and returned to Father's bedroom to replace the keyring. There was no time to lose. I went straight to the third phase of my plan. Some hours later, when Father had risen, I made my way downstairs carrying a can of pitch. Father crossed my path and stopped me in the stairwell. "What are you doing with that?" he said. "Dynamo room needs a new coat," I explained. "The storms will be starting soon." Right," Father grunted. "Don't mess it up. We can't lose the lamp again." "Yes, sir," I said, and we parted ways. I had no such intentions, of course. As soon as I reached the dynamo room, I crawled under the whirling machinery and loosened the sump bung, letting oil slowly trickle from the crankcase. It would take at most 2 hours for the engine to seize up. It was a fine, bright day with no sign of fog or squalls. I could rest easy knowing I had placed no sailors in danger. My sabotage complete, I gave the room a fresh coat of pitch and carried on with the rest of my duties. Prince Pablo must have been praying for my success, for it took only an hour for the lights to flicker out. I waited in the lantern house until I heard the repair boat approaching and Father's heavy footsteps lumbering down the stairs to meet them. Seizing my chance, I slipped into his room and counted out £500 from his wages, replacing their thickness with a deck of cards. Atop these, I placed a handful of notes, returning the box to its overstuffed state. So rarely did Father go ashore, he would not discover the theft for months. By then, I would be long gone. On the table, I found a clutter of stationery, pens, and sealing wax. As I stuffed the notes into an envelope, I thought of the thrashing I would receive if Father ever discovered my theft. But I quickly banished these thoughts. There would be time enough to salve my wounds when I reached Pablo's palace. The king would send a dozen doctors, the best in the land, to tend to my health. Hearing voices downstairs, I hurriedly sealed the envelope and slipped out of the room. Downstairs, I found Father in the receiving bay, barking at the workmen as usual. "What the hell went wrong this time?" he growled. "Oil leak," said the workman. "Looks like she seized up." "It looks," Father snapped back, "like you idiots don't know how to turn a bloody spanner. Now get it fixed and do it right this time." The workman gave a quick, frightened nod and disappeared through the hatch. I sat on the steps and waited. I needed only a second, a moment's inattention to slip a workman the envelope. But Father stood still, looming like a sentinel over the repair crew. There he remained for over an hour before he glanced behind him and spotted me in the stairwell. "What are you doing up there? Get back to work." Over the next few hours, I kept my ears pricked up, listening for Father's footsteps. But he never left his post, not even as the workers packed up their tools and began boarding the launch. No, I muttered under my breath. "Just go, only for a second, please." I watched helplessly as the last worker stepped off the rock and the launch began to pull away. Gripped by panic, I reached out the window and blew a loud whistle through my fingers. One of the workmen glanced up. It was now or never. I muttered a brief prayer and cast the envelope out the window. My heart pounded as I watched it float down, tumbling end over end. It was a desperate gamble. One stray gust could send Father's hard-earned wages straight to Davy Jones. I mustered all my will and devotion, calling to the four winds to grant me this one reprieve. They did not hear me. I watched in horror as the envelope began to drift off course, carried off by the faintest of breezes. No, I cried, helpless as it fluttered off into the blue. But at the last instant, a workman's hand shot out and caught the envelope mid-air. He stared curiously at the package, then glanced up and gave me a curt nod. "Thank you," I mouthed, waving back as the launch pulled away. I stepped back from the window and collapsed against the wall, breathing a great sigh of relief. There was nothing to do now but wait until Pablo sent for me. I placed my hands on the cold stone walls and dreamed of the day when I would see them no more. A day now closer than I ever imagined.